Hello, everyone, and welcome to the special board meeting of Akron Public Schools Board of Education on 21 March 2022. We will now start off with a roll call. Dr. Hall.
Dr. Akbar.
Here.
Mr. Alexander.
Present.
Ms. Autry.
Here.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Dr. Hall. Aye. Ms. Jackson.
Present.
Ms. McKittrick.
Here.
Thank you very much. We will now stand to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, if you're able. Ms. Alexander, if you don't mind.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. So today's topic is on the organizational structure for APS. We're going to start off in general session to have any questions we have about the positions themselves that were presented in 2 meetings ago, I think. And then any questions that are related to negotiations or tied to the livable wage, we will have those in executive session. So wanted to start off with any questions or discussions that you have about the position itself. And maybe I'll turn it over to Madam Superintendent to start us off.
Thank you, Dr. Akbar, and good evening, board members. And thank you so much for taking time for us to have this follow-up discussion relative to the organizational structure of administrative services, central services for our district at a time where we're able to focus on this discussion to ensure that all of your questions are responded to in a timely way. I just want to acknowledge that Mr. Pendleton, CFO Pendleton, is on a much-deserved vacation this week, but I know we've had a chance for him to answer any of your questions relative to kind of gather that information if it's finance specific related. So just wanted to open it up again. The hope is that we would approach the coming year by first and foremost separating services that currently reside within one office. So that is our Director of Student and Family Services, along with the Director of Safety and Security. So currently that comprises all of those services in one office. And because of the nature and importance of those services and the need to deepen accountability and to ensure that we do have a higher level of service provided to our district, we believe it necessary to separate those to not be occurring in one office. So within the Director of Student and Family Services, just as a reminder, that office itself oversees all of our attendance-related items. It oversees the ombudsman or kind of problem solving with families around any of the issues that families have. It is responsive to hearings or appeals that come before the district and then any of the related services. So it focuses on that as well. And then family engagement in particular, family and community engagement, but in family engagement, we are wanting to build out a strategy to more effectively work with our families across the system and to build capacity in educators to play their role in that process. So that's the student services ends of things. And then having a office that is devoted to safety and security of the district would allow us to really deepen our practices, especially our proactive practices of ensuring that both students and staff members have ample training and exposure to crisis response and crisis management. We would also have a more detailed follow-up with students who are experiencing ongoing disciplinary challenges as well in a proactive way. So partnering, having our school safety personnel partner with our positive behavior supports teams and supporting them, that would be happening as well with our safety and security forces, and then building out even further our relationship with safety forces around our city, with the Akron Police Department in collaboration with the university and other safety forces, the fire department, things of that nature. In this day and age of uncertainty, we just believe that we can and should do more to plan, prepare, and respond. And there is additional information should we move into executive session. I can talk to you about that. But that is the first office that we would like to ensure has its due attention by separating those services. Also, as it relates to our expanded learning, we have responded to the needs of our students and have begun to offer more opportunities for our young people and their families. And we currently do not have someone who is coordinating this significant expansion of our after-school, our summer learning programs. So for that position in particular, you might recall that it is a budget-neutral position for the coordinator of expanded learning, but it was a clarification of title and role in our district that we wanted to formalize. So that is the third in the series of 5. The other position that we had discussed was to appoint someone consistent with how the format is at our elementary level to be the secondary principal supervisor. As you're aware, on our elementary level, we have John Dawson, who supports Mary Outley in ensuring that our principals have the feedback, support, facilitation of their professional learning community so that they are growing, developing, and being held accountable for leadership at our schools. We want to ensure that that is the case as well on our secondary level. The principalship, as you know from much of the research and information, it really is second only to classroom teachers, the highest lever of where a system can ensure excellence is occurring for its young people, is through ensuring that we have not only top-tier talent and leadership, but also support happening. And so the principal supervisor position is one that we started the year off with, really innovating in that regard, and had a person who we had placed in that role. You might recall Mr. Larry Johnston from Firestone was supporting principals at the beginning of the year, and then was also acting as a building principal at the same time. And the building itself required his full time and attention. And so we did first make sure that the building was taken care of, but we did not want to abandon the role itself because the role itself is a research-based practice for systems. And so I continue to hope that the board is able to support the principal supervisor position as a position that we would want to add to our administrative framework. And then the last position we talked about initially was the Chief Operations Officer position. And the Chief Operations Officer position would respond to our district challenge. Our district has significant long-range planning needs across our facilities, technology, and safety, which directly impacts learning conditions for our students and our ability to attract and retain both students and staff ultimately in our school, dependent on how smooth and effective the operations are. So the district previously, in other years, had a deputy superintendent that was, offered leadership and support in the role of a Chief Operations Officer and offered extensive supervision, support, long-range strategic planning around school facilities, athletic facilities, technology infrastructure, and instructional technology. We really, as we face the future, I spent the first part of this year getting a handle on what was the state of planning and the state of need in the district. And we are beginning to compile that information so that we can bring to the board some scenarios about our facilities, especially our non-CLC facilities that are going to require a great deal of our time and attention, and even the patterns, the living patterns and school patterns of our school community. So I do feel like there is a need to continue to focus on strategic leadership. There is a need to continue to develop out our relationships in the business community in particular, because we will need to solve many of our longer range challenges in collaboration with our community at large. And especially given the fact that over not only now, but in the near future, we will continue to see some of our very talented and experienced intellectual capital kind of escape into retirement. There is the need to ensure that this type of leadership support exists in our district. So the last position that I offered to you and stand prepared to answer any remaining questions around is the Chief Operations Officer position.
All right, are there any questions for Madam Superintendent? Ms. McKittrick?
Regarding the coordinator of expanded learning, this says that it's not a new cost, that the funding will come from ESSER. Well, we know that ESSER only lasts so long, so then what happens after that?
Right. One of the things we do hope to do is to establish practices and processes that might not require, in the longer term, the same level of coordination once they're embedded, and as we then experience additional retirements or movement, it might be through our staffing process over time that this is not an additional cost. So we will continue to look at our staffing model and to take opportunities as persons retire and as we continue to look at the structure of the district to also look for cost savings. So this would be, while we have ESSER funds, funded out of those funds. And if we cannot sustain it on our regular budget longer term, we would assess, first and foremost, do we still require that type of leadership and support, or is it something that is just more systematic because we've embedded it into our practice? So that's first and foremost. But if we do still feel like we require that type of leadership, we would have to do so in a budget neutral way. Correct.
Madam
Mr.
Superintendent,
Perry.
you were talking about the secondary principal supervisor, and you noted that position already exists on the elementary level. Is there a reason why that didn't exist on the secondary level before? And if so, what changed to make it necessary now?
Yeah, I'm not sure, so I would probably need the support of my colleague, Dr. McWilliams-Woods. I believe, again, at the start of this year, we did have that position in place in practice, although we didn't define it as a principal supervisor position. So we obviously saw the need, but I'm not sure prior to that if we had a like position. It's not on, yeah.
There we go. We didn't have, we had one other organization that had more area supervisors that had smaller number of buildings. So the quest was always to have smaller numbers of buildings. At the elementary level, we used to have 40-some elementaries, and we used to have 2 executive directors for elementary because of the volume of schools. And then one in budget cut times got cut, and then we had about 34 around that time and had then one principal supervisor for elementary added just because of the number of schools. But when you look at secondary with the specialty schools now, it's all about the number and the volume of schools with the importance of principalship that you're trying to supervise. So it comes down to needing that attention and supervision and that personal attention to really move school improvement is why we would like to replicate that at the secondary level as well.
And again, since the history of Akron's practice, there has been a steady and ongoing body of research that the Wallace Foundation has done that really has continued to look at the principalship in particular and and its impact on student achievement.
Any other questions? Ms. Autry?
Just to follow up on that same topic, I was wondering if you could differentiate a little bit between the principal supervisor and what the current secondary director does as far as what the actual work is.
Right. And so the secondary director does do some level of coaching himself, but is primarily responsible for a lot of the implementation of the bigger types of strategies. I'll give you for instance. More recently, we've been exploring some of the challenges and opportunities related to student schedules. And so feeling like the way in which we approach our scheduling of courses, scheduling of faculty, things of that nature, might not be allowing us to maximize certain courses for certain students. And so when given those types of opportunities of where are there places in our secondary school practice that need to be addressed, Mr. Black, for instance, would take the lead on facilitating the learning teams. So it's not just that all of his time is coaching principals. He's also the lead learner as it relates to secondary matters. He is ultimately the accountable person because, again, we can't hold everyone equally accountable. So he's the accountable person for our secondary schools as it relates to the implementation of their strategy. So it's a higher level of leadership, and he would be the person that would oversee then the principal supervisor that would have a smaller scope of coaching principals in an area of their practice in particular.
Any other questions? Dr. Hall?
So I'll start by asking two questions at a time, and then we can do the merry-go-round. So just as a follow-up question to Ms. Autry's question as well. So again, and I think to Mr. Perry's question as well. So I'm just kind of trying to mirror, the elementary side and the secondary side. And we've got Ms. Atley Kelly, and we have a principal supervisor that supports her. That's current state. And then we have on the secondary side, we've got Mr. Black, and we've got Mr. Hatcher too. Is that correct?
Mr. Hatcher oversees particularly the specialty schools.
Okay.
So those schools with very unique practice that usually have, because of their practice, they're deviating from what's normal. You usually have to break down a lot of barriers. This year, a great deal of his time was in standing up our online school. So he focuses specifically on specialty schools and programs.
Gotcha.
And
So, and forgive my ignorance, I just want to make sure I understand the moving parts. So does Mr. Hatcher, does he have a principal supervisor in his shop as well, or does he do the coaching for those principals at the specialty schools?
he does the coaching for those principals, and in most of those instances, because of the nature of the design of their program, they also are paired with consultants or groups. So our STEM schools are also plugged into the STEM network.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, and then, and again, just trying to understand. So, but there are more grade schools, obviously, than there are secondary schools. And so I guess as I'm looking at kind of the equal work, even if you hire a principal supervisor position, that person's still going to have more work on their plate than the elementary equivalent.
Right, and it's different work as well, because when the students, what we started the secondary principal supervisor role focusing on this year was the middle school transformation. So when we began the year, it was really how do we begin to embed the practices of our College and Career Academy framework, those sorts of things. And so it's not the same number of schools, but the complexity, because we are headed towards graduation or career attainment tracks, the complexity gets a bit different.
Right. But these principal supervisor roles, they are predominantly roles that are centered on coaching, right?
They are centered on coaching. They are centered on, coaching, capacity building. It might be facilitating learning conversations across schools. One school is struggling with something, another has figured out to ensure that there is cross-district learning.
Gotcha. And so I guess where I was going with that line of questions was to say that if it's a role that's primarily centered on sort of the coaching and of principals, and the grade school side has way more principals than the secondary side, doesn't logic dictate that you should have two of these roles as opposed to one? That's why I'm asking that question.
It is, and there actually is.
I'm saying two on the grade school side versus one on because there's more schools on the grade school side. We have 1 and 1. That's where I was kind of going with that,
Yeah, and so there's a body of research out there about the span, you know, so how many schools ought a principal supervisor have to be at their highest level of effectiveness. And so, that would require more on that side. So you're correct. By the same token, we really do need to launch the practices in our middle school. We need to have that moving so that as those students move on and transition to our high schools, they have a higher level of preparation to take advantage of all that we offer in our high schools towards their futures. Because one of the things in my listening tour since coming that I heard a lot about was in students were aware that, well, they weren't aware of all of our opportunities. They were aware of many of our opportunities, but still needed more support in those, and still parents weren't as sure our students were prepared as they should be to take advantage of those opportunities. And so a lot of that has to do with our ability to deepen our practice, which is what we're working on. So I think we know that. We're doing the work.
Gotcha.
But it
Okay.
is going to require feedback and support.
Roger that. And then I think the last question I had was going to be around. So I was trying to make sure I was following it's more of a clarification question. I was trying to follow the differences between the Director of Student Family Services and the Director of Safety and Security. And I was trying to figure out, so hearings sort of lie in one role, student behavior lies in the other. I guess I was trying to figure out where are they both, because I thought we were trying to move all of that into one role.
We are. And so the hearings themselves are a student services. So when a student is referred downtown, they are referred through our student services division, not our safety and security division.
Okay.
And so there are hearings that take place that may or may not result in discipline. Sometimes it is problem solving in the building. Sometimes it is some sort of action, but that happens in our student services place in the house. In terms of safety and security, so that has to do with our safety practices. So it might be the use of metal detectors, in our buildings, or other safety routines, whether we have are training our students on their awareness. When you see something, say something, so it's everything from the response end to the proactive, what do I need to know to make good choices to keep myself safe. There is still, on the safety ends of things, oftentimes, depending on the nature of the situation, times at which staff there will also interact with families and schools, because there are investigations, reports that are written, sometimes proactive referrals to services throughout our community, and hopefully one office is working with another office so that more of the proactive support things are happening in the student services ends of things, and more of the consequences and training ends of things are happening in the other.
So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand. So the consequences component of it, that lies in safety and security.
Depending on the nature of it. So it could be, for instance, the police department is going to come execute a warrant, for a student who is attending one of our schools. They would work with our safety and security division, because that personnel would be more steeped in that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But the hearing component of it, though, that still lies with student and family services?
That would lie with student and family services
And all
now.
other student behavior also lies with student and family services as well?
The positive behavior
Positive
support, so all of the proactive training, things of that nature.
Roger that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we can still, so that's how it is thought through today.
Yeah.
We can still, as we learn more, make adjustments. What we don't want to do, and I think you all would agree with, because I know from the conversations we've had, is to really treat our proactive measures as proactive measures, and not have students feel like they're that things are just coming from a safety point of view, but we're building the capacity in our students to make positive choices and to access resources, them and their families.
All right, any other questions? Okay. So I have two questions. I'm trying to reconcile the budgetary commentary around the expanded position being budget neutral, which doesn't seem to be quite accurate potentially. And I wonder, so in the current role is, I think, coordinator of school improvement. So are we backfilling that position?
Yes.
Okay, so we're adding another position, which is adding dollars to the budget, which doesn't make it budget neutral. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, because that math doesn't math to me. So the other question that I had was around just the idea of us being able to systemically, or in your term, systematically embed the after-school programming and other items around expanded learning within the next 2 years, and the idea that we may do away with that position. I think that it's kind of difficult to say that since we have so much need in that area. And then two, I think we should be careful of adding positions that we think are going to be temporary, especially for people who have been with the district for a long time. I don't know. That doesn't sit well as a good argument.
Right, and I think the less an argument and more of a just frame need is this notion, we've talked a bit about this build now and do later, type of approach, where we do see the need right now to have an expanded set of services and opportunities for our students that we need to stand up. We need to ensure our practices around how families access those, how we set priorities for those. So there's all of this organizational setup and management initially that needs to occur in that space. And we do not have the dedicated staff to be able to attend to that. And that actually is in the sweet spot of what the ESSER resources were provided for, to allow us the additional capacity, different capacity, to be able to attend in areas where we saw need, especially post the pandemic, to respond to our students, but also to accelerate their learning. Most districts are doing some form of that in the area of extended learning time, after school time, using their summers robustly, and we feel the need to focus in that area as well, based on the feedback that we've received from our families about their last experience. So towards that end, dedicating the capacity in that area and using ESSER funds, which is different from our school improvement funds, which his role currently is a school improvement project management role that would be backfilled in the Office of School Improvement using those funds. This would be using the ESSER dollars to provide those expanded services.
Thank you. And so I appreciate that, and also I'm glad I have clarity that it's not budget neutral. But the other question that I had is around I have two concerns. One, adding so many high-wage positions so fast, especially in the time when we're looking at our priorities with livable wage, and also having to go into negotiations, not going into specifics about those two, but that's a big concern of mine. And I know we added the additional assistant superintendent, and I'm not saying that they could do everything, but I think that that is added level of capacity around the rationale for that position was to better support our schools. So I'm wondering about us at least embarking on that process to see how much support and success we can get, and then in the meantime, and before we add additional high wage positions.
Right, and so many of these positions, and I don't want to, at all. I think these positions are appropriate to their roles. These aren't all at the highest level of the organization, but they're providing the services that I feel are needed in this time for us to move the system to a higher level of effectiveness. Many of you on a regular basis are copied on emails with parents who are trying to get their problem solved, trying to access many supports, telling us what the needs of their students are. I too have been copied and engaged in that, not only from our families, but also in listening to our faculty and staff, talk about the ability or the need of the district to really attend to some of its operational supports and planning, and to be able to perform more effectively. So one of the things we talked about very early on when I arrived was that I would take the first part of this year and listen and learn before offering any point of view about how to lead forward. And I've spent a great deal of time listening to all stakeholders, observing us in practice, both for where we are strong and for where there are needs, and really believe that this ask being put forward is something that I believe is essential to our ability to not only continue to be responsive to our students, but to truly position ourselves to meet the robust goals that our college and career academies suggest. And in doing so, I've been kind of watching what's happening strategically around us, and I know that we are not the only organization that is also looking at our structure and trying to make those hard calls about to what degree are we lined up to really achieve our strategic goals. And so I too am one that I'm always very conscious of our spending. I'm very conscious of using staff in the most efficient and effective ways, and really believe that this investment at this point in time will have the yield that we want and need.
All right, are there any other questions? Ms. Alexander?
Yeah, I completely understand the organizational chart, and I know that before we started and before current Superintendent Fowler Mack is here, that Superintendent James was looking at restructuring our flow chart, because there in the past we intentionally did not fill some of those positions, even though we really needed to fill those positions back in that time, because we didn't want to hear that people were saying that we're so top-heavy and we're doing these things. But those positions, the work that was being done by those individuals was consumed by some of our current senior staff, and so they have been consumed with a lot of work that really is not the work that they probably need to be doing under their umbrella. So that was something that we were working on just before Superintendent James left. That was something we had deep discussions and several discussions about. Two, looking at the positions that we have here, the one we talked about, the coordinator expanded learning, that is ESSER funds, and that's not going to hurt us at all right now as far as the budget. If we look into the future, that may be something we need. And then it was mentioned that also possibly due to attrition, that we would have some positions that probably may not need to be filled, or we'd have people who would leave. And so those dollars would slide over into possibly this position. Out of all these things, and looking at this work here and this chart here that the superintendent is trying to bring to us, is that all of these things that we're trying to do will trickle down to the most important thing that we need to do is to our students, because all this work is being done, that it will trickle down to help all of our principals, our teachers, our students in particularly, which you really need this here. And I think it would be, we need to make sure that we have that embedded at that process there, because if the kids don't get what they need, then we're not doing our job. I know we want to do some other things, and we're going to probably end up doing those other things that we want to do, but we still got to get this part done here. I think that I can't speak for everybody, but I think that when you're having positions like this here in any organization, any president, CFO, or superintendent of any school system want to have these positions in place so that they can get it off their plate, and they have these individuals there to do those jobs. You have people in positions such as those, no matter where we go in corporate America or in school systems, so that the superintendent can be free to do their job. That is something that we need, because if you don't have a superintendent doing their job and they're doing other work, or they having to look at have someone else who's not in a position to do the work, then that's not effective, and that doesn't help our district and doesn't help our students. So I look at all this work that we're trying to do here in these positions. That is work that will be trickled down to our students so they can get the possible services and things that they need at the right time. So I don't know how everyone else is looking at this and thinking about it, but I'm looking at it in the point that if I am a CFO and so forth, what do I need in my positions, in my leadership, to make sure that my ship is running smoothly, so that the goal that we're trying to achieve is achieved through that work that we're trying to do in those individuals. Because if you don't have individuals in certain places that can do the work, it's not going to help at all. And I'm going to say that I was in a position once before where we didn't have a position, and you got to have your staff there, and it hurt our organization, and I took the hit for it. I took the blame for it. I probably shouldn't have, but I did, because I was the one running the organization at that time. But when I look back at that, I said I should have done what people didn't want me to do, because it would have helped the organization and hurt the organization in the long run. So in looking at this stuff here, I think that it's something that we need, and we need to move forward with it, and that we will be able to do the other work that we want to do as we move forward as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, because there are some things that were not done intentionally back in the day with Superintendent James, so that we could still continue to move forward and try to help financially with the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to, yes, Dr. Hall?
Yeah, so just a quick comment. I think one of the areas where I've been stuck on this topic is trying to reconcile sort of where we've been for the last so many years versus where we're trying to go now. And I think that folks have been, understandably so, reticent to say anything that could be even taken in the slightest way as besmirching the time of Dr. James, besmirching his reputation. And I think that what's becoming clear is that there are areas of opportunity that existed prior to this superintendent coming on board, and that's okay to say that. But we've got to be able to say that, and that's not besmirching Dr. James. It's just saying, hey, we've got a new leader in here who brings their own skill sets and talents, and they're identifying maybe areas that have existed previously and things that are current, right? I think we've got to be able to say that and have that conversation. That's okay too. Dr. James was great in his ways and with his skill sets, but he wasn't perfect, and that's okay, right? And so as we're talking about these kinds of positions, I think part of what's come into focus for me as we've had these conversations, I'm glad that we've had the time to do it, is that there are things that have been long-standing areas of opportunity, in addition to things that are new as a result of the pandemic, right? So things maybe we didn't know as much about before prior to the pandemic, that the pandemic has really exposed and/or exacerbated, that we're trying to address in part through some of these new roles. And I think it's okay. I think we've got to be willing to say that out loud, and I think that's what we're moving and starting to do. And I think that's the part of the conversation that I think needed to happen. And so I'm glad that we're kind of talking about this now, and so that's I'll leave it there in the spirit of brevity.
Thank you very much. So we're going to actually move on. Just one minor second. I just wanted to say that I appreciate this conversation, and I know for me, I just want to make sure it's noted that it's important that we, I believe, have in parallel the conversation around livable wage and any additional administrative positions, mainly because of one, the sense of urgency, but two, that conversation is long overdue as well. And then the last thing is I want to make sure that no one leaves thinking that I'm against administrators or high wage positions, because I am an administrator. And so I would be against myself. So that's not what I'm saying at all. So just wanted to make sure I said that. And with that being said, we will entertain a motion to recess into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1 for the purposes of considering the appointment, employment, and compensation of a public employee or official of the school district. Is there a motion?
I so move.
It's been moved by Mr. Perry. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Alexander. We will now stand to recess just so that, yes, actually, sorry. Roll call vote, please. Dr. Hall?
Sure. Dr. Akbar?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Autry?
Aye.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Dr. Hall? Aye. Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. McKittrick?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We will now stand in recess into executive session. Just to make a personal note that I do have to go back to work, and so that depending upon how long this is, Dr. Hall may be reconvening us. We now stand in executive session.
So we're reconvened. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We are reconvening at 8:06 p.m. From executive session. And Madam Superintendent?
Yes, good evening again to our board members. So I wish to recommend the establishment of the following positions and job codes for approval. That would be the Chief Operating Officer position, the Supervisor of Secondary Principals, the Director of Safety and Security, Director of Student and Family Services, and Coordinator of Expanded Learning.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and properly seconded. We'll move to a roll call vote. Ms. McKittrick?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Akbar is absent. Dr. Hall, aye. Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 6-4, 0 against, and 1 not present. So the motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for that. Are there any other items, any new business anybody wishes to propose? Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn then.
So move.
Second.
All right, the motion has been moved and properly seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Dr. Hall? Aye. Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. McKittrick?
Yes.
Dr. Akbar is absent. Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Okay. We stand in adjournment, and it is 8:08. Thank you all very much, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.